Darian Voss had lived next door to the Zenthis podhouse for 8 months before he ever heard a sound from it. The structure had arrived on a flatbed transport in the dead of winter, dropped onto the empty lot beside his house like a seed pod from some distant tree, its shell the color of wet slate. The local news had run a single segment about it: first non-diplomatic alien resident settles in suburban Ohio, and then promptly forgotten about it, the way humans forgot about most things that didn't scream for their attention. Lyra Zenthis did not scream for attention. In the rare moments Darian glimpsed her through the gauzy film that served as her windows, she was no taller than his kitchen counter, slight as a sparrow, with skin like brushed pewter and eyes too large for her narrow face. She moved like something built for a world with thinner gravity, all caution and economy, as though every step cost her something she couldn't afford to spend. He'd waved to her exactly twice. She had not waved back. He'd assumed, reasonably, that this was the end of their acquaintance. Then, at 11 minutes past midnight on a Tuesday in March, something tapped on his window. Darian sat up in bed, heart-lurching, and found himself looking down, not across, not up, but down, into a pair of luminous amber eyes peering over the sill. Lyra Zenthis stood on his flower bed in the cold, her thin chest rising and falling too fast, both small hands pressed flat against the glass like she was holding herself upright by it. He had the window open before he'd finished thinking about it. Hey, are you okay?" He dropped to a crouch so they were closer to level, and up close he could see the fine tremor running through her, the gray pallor beneath the pewter sheen of her skin. "What's wrong? Do you need help?" For a long moment she said nothing. Her people, he'd read somewhere in the one dry pamphlet the relocation office had left in his mailbox, did not ask for things easily. Asking was a debt. Debt, among the Ithari, was almost sacred and almost never forgiven. "My systems," she said at last, her voice a papery murmur, accented in a way that made the words sound like they were being translated through static. "They are failing. The cold cycle generator in my home. It broke 2 nights past." "Your heat's out? For 2 nights?" Darian's stomach dropped. March nights in Ohio still dipped below freezing. "Lyra, why didn't you knock sooner?" Her jaw tightened, the closest thing to an expression he'd seen on her yet. "Because there is a cost to asking. And I did not know what you would want in return." He almost laughed, except there was nothing funny about the way she swayed where she stood, nothing funny about how her 2 large eyes kept losing focus and snapping back, the look of someone running on fumes and pride. "There's no cost," he said. "Come inside. Now. We'll figure out the rest after you're warm." "You do not understand," she whispered, and for the first time something like fear cracked through the careful stillness of her. "My biology, I cannot simply use your heat the way you do. I require thermal regulation within an exact band. Too warm and my nervous tissue will swell. Too cold and..." She stopped. "I have perhaps 6 hours before cellular failure becomes irreversible." Darian's mind, which had spent the last several minutes catching up to the surreal fact of an alien on his lawn, suddenly snapped into a different gear entirely. This was no longer strange. This was a problem. And problems, Darian Voss, a mechanical engineer who'd spent the last decade keeping factory HVAC systems alive through every kind of disaster, understood very well. "Okay," he said. "Okay. Talk to me. What's the exact band? Give me numbers." Lyra blinked up at him, thrown. "You, what?" "Numbers, Lyra. Temperature range. Humidity tolerance. Whatever your generator was doing for you, I need to know what it was doing, in numbers I can use." He was already pulling on his boots, grabbing his phone, his toolbox, his coat off the hook. "We don't have 6 hours to waste being polite about it." Something shifted behind her eyes as disbelief, maybe, or the first thin edge of hope. 11 degrees Celsius. No more than 13. Humidity above 60%, or my membranes will crack. Got it. Show me your generator. The inside of her podhouse was unlike anything Darian had ever stood inside, close and dim, the air faintly sweet and mineral, every surface curved like the inside of a shell. Tucked against the far wall was a squat machine the size of a dishwasher, its casing cracked open, wires spilling out like the guts of something that had died mid-surgery. Darian crouched beside it and felt 12 years of professional instinct take over. You tried to fix this yourself. I did not wish to be in anyone's debt. Lyra. He looked up at her, and made his voice as gentle as he could manage while his hands kept moving, testing connections, tracing the burn marks along one coil. You're my neighbor. That's not a debt system. That's just what neighbors do. It is not how my people relate to one another, she said quietly. Among the Ithari, every kindness given creates an obligation owed. I did not wish to put that weight on you. Then don't think of it as Ithari kindness. He found the problem, a corroded relay, easy enough to bridge with what he had in his truck, and was already moving for the door. Think of it as human stubbornness. We don't measure favors. We just don't let people freeze to death next door. Give me 4 minutes. He was back in 3, with a soldering iron, a spare relay scavenged from his own backup generator, and a portable humidifier he kept for his basement workshop. He didn't ask permission before he started, he simply worked, fast and sure, the way he'd worked through 100 night shift emergencies when machines were the only thing standing between people and disaster. Lyra watched him in silence, swaying slightly, her breath coming shallow and quick, and slowly, as the relay clicked back into place and the cold cycle generator shuddered, then hummed, then settled into a low and steady thrum, that breath began to even out. The temperature gauge crept downward. 18 degrees. 15. 13. Lyra sank onto the floor as if her legs had simply stopped being willing to hold her, and for the first time since he'd met her, something that might have been relief moved openly across her face. 11.8, she murmured, eyes on the readout, voice cracking with something that wasn't just exhaustion. You did not need numbers for the band. You only needed me to survive until you could ask the numbers later. That's generally how it works. Darian sat back against the curved wall, letting the warmth, her warmth, which to him felt like a basement in autumn, settle around them both. You knock. We figure it out. Nobody keeps score. On my world, Lyra said slowly, no one tapped at strangers' windows in the dark and hoped to be saved without cost. We do not trust easily that something can be given without weight attached. Well. Darian glanced sideways at her, at the impossible amber eyes and the two thin shoulders that had nearly killed her rather than ask for help 2 nights too late. You're not on your world anymore. You're on mine. And out here, that's just Tuesday. She studied him for a long moment, something unreadable and very old moving behind her eyes, calculation, maybe, or the dismantling of a belief she'd carried across the stars. Then, haltingly, like a word in an unfamiliar language, she said, thank you. Any time, Darian said. Literally. Knock any time. Outside, the Ohio night rolled on toward morning, cold and ordinary and utterly unaware that somewhere on a quiet suburban street, the first thread of trust between two species had just been stitched together, not with treaties, or diplomacy, or grand declarations, but with a soldering iron, a borrowed humidifier, and one human's refusal to let his neighbor go quietly into the dark. It wasn't a debt. It wasn't owed. It was just what neighbors did.